The inadvertent burning of the Koran, the Muslim holy book, by US troops at an airbase in Afghanistan has caused 2 days of protest so far. A senior US commander has apologized, saying the religious materials were destroyed by mistake. But the violent response to the demonstration by security forces has left 7 people dead. Well, let's get more on this with Zaid Hamid. He's defence analyst at the independent think tank Brass Tacks. So a second day of violence. Can a simple apology from the US appease protesters?
I'm afraid apology is not going to work here. This is the worst possible nightmare for the Americans, that so far they have been facing the resistance from the Pashtun elements. But incidents like these are actually galvanizing the non-Pashtun elements, the Tajiks, the Hazaras and the Uzbeks, who were supposedly allied to the Americans so far, are turning hostile. Now, this is basically the fallout of this, which the Americans fear, and which in reality would happen is it will extend and expand the base of the resistance against the Americans. Apologies are not going to work. This is the worst PR disaster that the Americans could have at this moment when they are the most vulnerable.
So this is having severe repercussions on the safety of US troops now in Afghanistan.
You see, not just the safety, the entire outcome of the war would now depend on events like these. They have been triggered, and the fallout, the domino effect, is going to be intense, as we said. Already the Americans have closed down, locked down their embassy in Kabul, unprecedented event, and the fact that the non-Pashtun elements, the Tajiks, the Hazaras and the Uzbeks, are now joining the resistance and expressing their rage against the Americans is basically the worst military nightmare. It's a diplomatic disaster, it's a political chaos, it's a PR anarchy for them. And there is absolutely no way they can come out of this. Taliban could not be more happier than the events that have happened in Afghanistan. If Taliban could not defeat the American Marines have themselves dug their grave. This is their Waterloo now, events like these. Recently, in Mazar Sharif also, you had seen the violence against the Western and UN elements. The fact is that this is expanding now, and events like these are not getting less, but increasing every day.
You talk about the Taliban. The protesters have even been chanting pro-Taliban slogans. Just how concerned now should the Karzai government be over this?
You see, this is what we are saying. One thing that the Americans and before them, the Soviets even miscalculated about the Afghan nation is that despite the fact that Afghans can fight with each other, but Afghans never welcome the foreign invaders. And the American presence here, the Tajiks and the Uzbeks have reluctantly accepted the Americans. They have not accepted them as part of their society and culture and faith. And events like these demonstrate that fact. So the fact is that the Taliban, they have already infiltrated the Afghan National Army. Taliban have already the sympathies of Taliban, not as Taliban, but as Pashtun Afghans, have also spread across the non-Pashtun elements. And Taliban have also moderated their stance against a bigger threat, that's the foreign occupation, and softened their stance against other ethnic communities like Tajiks, Uzbeks and Hazaras. So this is definitely a crisis for Karzai, but a much bigger crisis for the Americans.
Could this perhaps maybe an incentive for the US to bring their deadline to leave the country forward even further? And indeed, if they were to leave, how stable is the future now for Afghanistan, bearing in mind what you've just said concerning the pressures against Karzai?
You see, the fact is that the Americans never want to leave Afghanistan. This is one deception that they have been giving out to the world for long. They are talking of creating base. They have bases in Afghanistan, they're in Kandahar also, in Bagram, in different places, where they want to have their small fortresses and stay in there. And the NATO supply line that have been blocked in Pakistan has got an invasion level hardware into it, almost 3,500 armored vehicles and 5,000 containers of explosives and weapons. You don't do this kind of build-up if you want to leave a country. Americans were not planning to leave, they were only planning to just withdraw themselves to certain green zones. So these kind of events are definitely going to throw their entire American plan into chaos, because it depended on the cooperation from the Tajiks and the Hazaras. And these events like these are going to make them hostile as well.
Zaid Hamid, thank you very much for your perspective. Good to hear from you, defence analyst at the Brass Tacks think tank, joining us live there in Pakistan. Thanks for your time.